Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of the polling station because not only are we previewing the oncoming election in Mid Bedfordshire, yes, at last it looks like we'll finally have one, but we've got a very special guest joining me and Paul Krishnamurty. Councillor Gareth Mackey is the chair of Central Bedfordshire Council, and not just that also, but he has a genuine chance in what looks to be the best political betting contest of the year in this country. We're so honoured you've decided to join us, and we thank you for your time. Tell everybody who, especially people who don't know you, sort of who you are, a bit about yourself and your position on the council briefly.
As you said, my name's Councillor Gareth Mackey. I am an independent councillor for Flitwick in the heart of Mid Bedfordshire, and I sit on Central Bedfordshire Council, and I'm the chairman of the council. I've been in local politics for many years now, more than 12 years, where I've served as a town councillor and mayor of my town 3 times. I've been on the unitary council for 4 years, and yes, we managed to overturn a considerable Conservative majority at the last local elections, and we are now the first independent run unitary or county council in history in England. So something we're a bit proud of.
And understandably so. Of course, joined by friend of the show, Paul Krishnamurty, who's going to give us a rundown of Mid Bedfordshire as a seat. So what can we expect, Paul?
So the thinking of the bigger picture, we've seen loads and loads of by-elections in supposedly safe Tory seats over the last year and a half as their voters collapsed. And most of them disastrous, but then you'd see Uxbridge where they surprisingly held on. Now, all of these constituencies have their own dynamics, and I think they fit into different types of boxes. So I think when people first looked at this seat, they would look at it as a very safe Tory seat, much wealthier than average, never voted anything other than Tory and never looked like voting anything other than Tory in a general election. And generally in those places where there's no Labour history, you assume that the Lib Dems would be the natural opposition, right? That's the sort of place where Labour would stand aside, and that's what the betting did at the start, making them 4-1 on. But actually, when you look at the seat and you look at Gareth's independence and what's happened and there in the council, it's clear that there isn't one opposition. It's not clear that there's this singular opposition to the Tories in the way that the Lib Dems would be able to sign up. So the way I would describe it as a blue wall seat, but one of the founding stones of the blue wall, not something that anyone would normally look at. And by that I mean, this is a wealthy seat in the south of England with higher education than the average, better health than the national average. And yet, as we have seen, as these local council election results show, this has been a real problem for the Conservative Party since 2019. That the kind of new direction, the more populist direction of the Conservative Party hasn't travelled so well into the blue wall. So I think it's one of those seats. I think it's one of those seats where the Tories have a very long way to fall, and it's very possible because they're coming from almost a peak, their best ever result in 2019. And the main issue then becomes who is the opposition and what would be a winning total. Now, I think, given Gareth doing well, at least well in that poll that we've seen, I think that the winner of this seat could be won with 35%. So it's actually possible that the Tories have a terrible night and hold on, but it's also possible for either the Labour or the Lib Dems to rise up from their usual sort of figure around 18 to 22%. They could easily go up to 35 in a by-election. Or it's possible, I guess, for Gareth. I mean, certainly, if that poll that was out, Labour Commission poll that had him on 19% is anything close to accurate, then I would say he's got a chance. And I would note that at those local elections, going through the wards, the trend you see over and over and over again is this is an independents versus Conservatives fight, that the Labour and Lib Dems really aren't in contention. So I think they could both have a big, big job coalescing the whole anti-Tory vote. And I guess For me, the question I would want to know for Gareth is, what is the does this network of independents, are you aligned on a series of core policies? Is there an ideology? You know, are they a natural fit for Labour voters or Lib Dem voters or for ex-Tory voters?
I think when you look at us, we're a very broad church, and I think one of the attractions of backing independents, and certainly a group of independents, when you look at the trend in national politics, you've gone from this very broad church in any political party to a very, very polarized and more radicalized version of what they stand for. Now, I would see myself as very much the old-fashioned centrist. And the nice thing about being an independent is you don't have to have an ideology. You listen very carefully to the things that are important to your residents and you act on them. At the end of the day, you're a public representative. You're not a delegate of a party and whipped to do a certain thing which residents might not agree with. So you can enact the things that you think are going to be absolutely in the best interests of your residents. And it doesn't matter if it's something traditionally left or something traditionally right. But I think from our perspective, we talk, we share information, we bat ideas across from each other. The nice thing about our group is we're not an echo chamber, and we disagree on a variety of things, and your beliefs and your policies are constantly challenged. So you have to make sure that you can build consensus. So when you come out to dealing with the public, you're already coming from a position where you're ready to learn, ready to absorb what they're telling you, and you're in a position where you can actually act on what they're telling you instead of having to run everything by the regional party. You have to then go to the national party and make sure that it doesn't conflict with their political stance.
So, I mean, it does strike me that this is a mindset, if you like, an approach that could really catch on in politics at the moment, because, you know, so we've seen all these elections, we're seeing Labour winning by vast numbers and Lib Dems, but I don't think anybody actually thinks any of those results were a massive endorsement of the National Labour Party strategy or the National Lib Dem strategy. It's a reaction against the government and reflective of a more general sickness of people being sick of Westminster. I think that seems like an alien concept to most people. They are the people who come on, who we see on our TV screens. Maybe that's harsh to say this, but they come across as celebrities almost. They're disconnected from the reality of most people's lives. And I guess that most of their constituency work is done by staff anyway. So they don't actually get that much interaction with ordinary people. And we have seen this. And I mean, your council is the most successful example of it. But we've seen it for a few years now, I think, in a lot of these local elections where you're seeing spates of independents breaking through with precisely the sort of message that you're giving. And I think if that gets a lot of coverage, if that gets media coverage, if that becomes part of the narrative of this election, then you've got a great chance, I think.
Absolutely. And I think politics as a whole now has an inherent insincerity. And people are becoming wise to that. And it's hard to sort of place how we've got where we've got. But there's the old saying that you get the politicians you deserve in a way. And we tend to reward those who spin the most convincing yarn, who maybe tell the biggest untruth, because we don't want to accept a reality which is perhaps less rosy than what's ahead of us. So we end up rewarding this kind of behavior. And my key message is that I want to reset that. I want to be the honest guy down the corner that you're going to meet in the local supermarket, walking around and bend my ear. You're going to see me walking the dog around, and you're going to want to bend my ear. You're going to stop and have a pint with me in the local pub and see me out on Saturdays down the football and all that kind of thing. And politics has to come from what is important to people. And I'm a firm believer that government of all levels should only be there to do things that you can't do for yourself. And a certain ex-prime minister, I think, said that you only go to your MP when you've run out of better options. And I think that's a very sad state of affairs. I think people should be going to their MP because they know that it's someone who intimately knows their area, who has the connections from a local council level all the way up to Westminster, and wants to just deliver the best for people, regardless of what their personal political opinion is. You're there to be a blank sheet for people to sort of cast their cares onto and write their own narrative and make life better. And I think that I'm hoping is going to be very powerful and very important.
Just to jump in on the point about being an MP, you're hoping to be people's MP, but one of the things I think we'll learn a lot about in this particular episode is what it's like running. So I'd like to give you a couple of questions basically on sort of the campaigning process. The first comes from Amethyst Deceiver, who is a friend of the podcast, watches the show every week, and we appreciate that very much. And he asks, hey, William, would love to know what kind of funds he has on hand, if he's fundraising, your electioneering strategy, tactics, and the issues you think will cut through for the local area. There's quite a few questions in one, but can we start actually with sort of the money question? Because it costs hundreds of thousands for some candidates to become an MP. What kind of funds are you working with?
I'm working with whatever I can raise. I've luckily got someone who will be able to help me with leaflets, and I think that's the core part of it. But I'm not working with the hundreds of thousands of pounds that the political parties have got. It's just silly money to me. And to me, when you are trying to spend that kind of money, it says one thing. It says that you are not connected to your community and you have no roots that you can sort of build or grow your campaign from. So I'm very lucky that I come from pretty much a constant campaigning background. Since I was elected to the Unitary Authority, I have spent every single day in campaign mode. Every single thing that I do, every response that I make is campaign mode. So I live and breathe Mid Bedfordshire. And I think that gives me a big advantage, that I don't need the kind of money that these guys are throwing at it. I think it's obscene, particularly in times of real difficulty in families, cost of living crises and inflation, that the political parties will throw this silly money at an election. So I'm in the low tens of thousands as opposed to the hundreds of thousands.
That's good actually, because you've answered the question I was going to press you on. Quick fire answer: are you fundraising?
Absolutely, I'm fundraising. Anyone who wants to contribute, I have a GoFundMe page,
okay.
And they can search that, Gareth Mackey for Mid Beds. So yeah, fundraising all the time and hoping to get as much in as I possibly can.
All right. Would like to talk about the issues you think will cut through, because it's not only just important to you, but actually it's going to be important to everybody watching. We're trying to think about this by-election. Let's have a Wid and Without Dorries section for this, because I feel that we could talk an awful lot about that particular situation, and we will, because it's important. But Nadine Dorries aside, a question that will probably make people very happy or very upset based on their leading. What do you think are the big issues for Mid Bedfordshire?
I think the biggest issue is going to be one of representation. Every single constituency, probably all 620 now, constituencies have got very similar problems. Everyone has got cost of living crisis. Everyone has got house building. Everyone has got crime to one degree or another. But I think when it gets down to brass tacks, people want to feel that they're going to be listened to by their MP, and I think they want someone who will represent them, who knows the area. I think that is what I'm hearing very much on the doorstep, is that people want a different approach from someone that they can trust. So someone who is honest and is demonstrably so, I think is going to be very important. But of course, we are going to have to fight if we get into Parliament on more national issues. We're going to have to represent the dysfunctional police system, the healthcare service, which is overstretched, the massive house building in areas, particularly like Mid Beds, which is vastly rural and sort of semi-urban. So when you get into building, you're going onto a lot of greenbelt. There isn't a lot of brownfield land there. So we are going to have to go ahead and do more to represent the voice of people who have been left behind on this.
Okay, thank you very much for this, because I think what I take from that is cost of living, healthcare representation, and let's say infrastructure with view to house building. Can I ask you a rather online question, a quick fire answer, but is Gareth Mackey YIMBY or a NIMBY?
I am pragmatic. I'm not against infrastructure. Infrastructure brings jobs and it brings opportunities. Sorry, the dog's going in the background.
I'm guessing he's a NIMBY.
Oh,
if I had to push to
it. He wants me to give the right answer. And, you know, I'm certainly not an NIMBY. I believe that you have to build houses. People need somewhere to live. And certainly with the growth in our communities around here, we have to have sensible allocations of housing in places that can support that housing, and we must have suitable infrastructure to be able to support that housing. So the police need adequate funding. So Bedfordshire is funded as a rural constabulary and needs to be funded more in line with its unique place in the national context. We've got large urban areas like Luton and Bedford, and those give a very interesting dynamic. So it costs more to police here. The health service is based in areas around Mid Bedfordshire. We don't have a hospital in Mid Beds. We've got one in Luton, one in Bedford, one in Milton Keynes. Nothing in the Mid Bedfordshire area. So people do need the investment into healthcare to be able to live their best lives and be able to put the roots down in the safe knowledge that they will be looked after. So many different things that are very, very important to people.
Okay. Who do you see as your main rivals? This is a question we've been asked and passing it on. I find it to be an interesting one, particularly from your perspective. So I wanted to know what your response to that was.
My rival is the political system which unfairly promotes the party system. You don't need to have parties. So all of them, the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives, and Labour, they are all my rivals because I'm trying to cut through the traditional narrative.
Fair enough. I'm going to serve this back at you. Who do you think is the most likely winner in a race without Gareth Mackey?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I can tell you who the loser is, and it's the people of Mid Bedfordshire.
Well played. I've got to give you your credit there. Well played.
I couldn't possibly tell you. That's what makes this election so interesting, is that the political dynamics are completely up in the air. I don't think you can predict it without me in there, and I don't think you can probably predict it with me in there as well. But of course, looking at the three last by-elections, I think they are are pros and cons for both Labour and the Liberal Democrats. I think that the Conservatives don't really stand a huge amount of a chance, because I think people are just so sick and tired of it. And again, it comes on the back of a failed council previously run by the Conservatives as well over here. So I think they may struggle. But yeah, I think Liberal Democrats and Labour, perhaps on paper, without me in the race, possibly have the best opportunity.
Can I just ask something here? So going back to the seat, I was talking about there not being a clear runner-up. Now, I mean, I just looked and writing about this seat over the last 50 years at Mid Bedfordshire, and it is extraordinary how this vote for second never really tilts particularly one way between Labour and Lib Dem. So even during the Blair years, where you had massive tactical voting and effectively the party standing aside in a lot of seats, didn't happen. You know, they maintained their things. So would you say that, with your knowledge of the area, would you say that's like a specific community thing, that it's like the Lib Dem areas just don't really, they have different demands, different interests, different characteristics to the Labour areas, and they don't really fit together?
Absolutely, and I think this constituency is very conservative with a small c. They want people who are pragmatic, and they don't like the swings to radicalism on the left or on the right. There's very much Middle England. So I think where you've had more recently a very radicalised Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn that's been deeply unattractive, a Liberal Democrat Party that's jumped into bed with the Conservatives and forgotten who they perhaps were, and then when they were something else, they were very much a protest vote. They didn't really seem to stand for anything. So if you've got someone with a very strong idea of what they stand for, I think you've got a much better chance of speaking to the everyday person in Mid-Bed. So they will go mostly to the Conservative side, small c Conservative, but they want that middle of the road option.
Another point, just to add to what you just said, to back up what you said about being Middle England. So on UK Electoral Calculus, which is a really good site for seat profiles, they have indicators for four things. There's economic, right or left, so you're ranked 0 to 620, so you're on 50 the seats. One of them is for national, one of them is for social conservative. And on the national question and on the social conservative question, Mid-Beds is bang in the middle. It's not, you wouldn't say on those measures it's a natural Conservative seat. I think it's a natural Conservative seat because it's wealthier than average, and where it is because it's rural, small town. But it is actually, I think, in general, a pretty reasonable indicator of Middle England.
It is, and I think you've also got to remember that over the years, the area has grown tremendously. I mean, you only need to look at my seat here in Flitwick. It's, if you go back to sort of the mid-1960s, you were looking at a population of maybe a couple of thousand. We're heading up to 15,000 people now, and along with population growth comes a broadening of the demographic as well, and of the political opinions. So throughout the constituency, you've got some of the key population centres have grown tremendously. The villages have remained somewhat the same. But the big population centres have got a variety of voters from a variety of different ethnic, economic and social backgrounds. And that adds quite an interesting diversity of opinion to the voter. And I think the more that this grows, the more likely people are to reject the political status quo.
Okay, thank you very much for those insights. I think it's really interesting. I want to ask you a question about data. Data is vital in these elections, particularly actually when it comes down to by-elections, and who is able to use their vote more efficiently and to target it better. We've seen it literally decide races. what sort of data are you working with? Number one, number two, how difficult basically, and this is a question asked by TV Tips UK, how difficult do you find it campaigning without the data that the major parties have, without those lists or systems? But of course, I'm asking that. You might well have your own lists and systems because you've got extensive history in the area. So explain that
Yeah.
for us.
I think that history in the area is absolutely critical. And I hear from a lot of residents who will sort of ring me, email me, message me and say, I've just had so-and-so party on the doorstep, and the person that was talking to me knew absolutely nothing about the area. So I think having those roots, those tendrils that I think I talked about earlier, going out into the community is invaluable. And also the timing of this by-election as well is very important. It comes on the back of the May local elections, where we obviously had a fantastic result for independents, and those independents were out on the doorstep, out working every single other political party. The data that they've gathered, the insights that they've gathered across the whole area are things that I have access to, and I know people who know their communities intimately. So yes, you might have data when it comes to picking a polling company and getting them to ring around. How candid are those people going to be when they answer the phone? That's anyone's guess. But living in the heart of Mid Bed, speaking to these people every single day, gives you, I think, a more unique insight into that. I mean, on top of that, there are also ward profiles that Central Bedfordshire have compiled. So we know what each ward within the area, what the economic status, what the educational status, or what the employment status is in all of these. So there is an element of being able to build a very good picture of what each ward will be able to represent, how you can target that ward. But I've always been very much a believer that nothing trumps getting out onto the street and talking to people, because they will tell you far more than any political researcher will be able to gain from sitting at a computer and looking through things. I mean, even from a social media perspective, our independent councillors have got the largest set of social media bases around the whole area, so we can tap into quite a lot of feeling and get into the minds of a lot of the voters, and see what's important to them. So data-driven approach, absolutely, but you've also got to go with your gut.
How many people do you have sort of I guess loosely working for you, in the sense that, you know, they're helping you with their time, or delivering leaflets, or doing like ad stuff or whatever? Just basically, how many people are there on like official team Mackay?
I've had 20, 30, 40, 50 offers of support. And this is not support which I've got to bus in from all over the country like the parties. These are people who live and work here.
How many of them currently like work, basically, how many of them are currently supporting you, like as we speak, in some capacity?
I've probably got a close, the core team is probably 6 or 7 people, and those are my basic campaign team. Then there's wider circles of people, about 20 or 30, and then it's like the proverbial onion. You've got layers to this, and I think it's going to be probably exactly the same for the political parties. Everyone will have their core, and then their support will broaden out from there. But if I put out a call on social media, I get inundated with people who want to come and support me.
Okay. We've talked a huge amount about yourself, but let's dig into basically the opposition, in the sense your opposition, because this, Paul, is a really competitive by-election bedding here. I mean, not only do we have an independent councillor, sorry, who is with us and who is by those standards, a short price now. There was well over, I believe, 33s, possibly even bigger, actually available with Star Sports previously.
Oh, sorry. I got 180 to 1 earlier in the piece on Gareth.
There you go. So we've seen your odds tumble. We've seen the Lib Dems drift, albeit they are still strong favourites. They were 2-5 when Nadine Dorries announced her resignation, or her resignation having delayed it for about 78 days, I believe. And we've seen a move for the Tories and Labour, more support slightly for Labour. Paul, wanted to ask what you're making of the market moves in general.
Yeah, well, my book right now, I've been laying the Lib Dems from about 4 to 6 upwards, still laying them at evens. And I backed Gareth at an average price of 50 to 1, starting off 180s, and I've kept going a bit. If I were to price this blind, I'd make the Tories and Labour joint favourites at about 7 to 4 each, something like that. And I'd have Lib Dems about 3-4 to 1 and Gareth about 8 to 1. I don't really see the Lib Dem thing taking off. It's crystal clear that Starmer is competing in this constituency, right? And without the Labour vote collapsing, I just don't see how they win. I don't see how they can marshal anything like that requires support, because, you know, this Conservative to Lib Dem transfers happened. It's only happening in specific places, isn't it? As I say, to go back to local elections, it didn't happen. It went to Gareth independents. So the Lib Dems do not have anything like a monopoly on the anti-Tory vote here, and that's a problem. I think that Labour are going to, you know, in the long term, a general election, I think they massively struggle to win this seat. And to talk about house building, there's a big thing. I mean, Labour are going to go into the election with promises to build houses in the south of England on a grand scale, including on the Greenbelt. Can't see that being a particularly popular message in Mid Bedfordshire. They might get over the line in this particular by-election. They're going to be able to bust in a lot of activists from Bedford, Milton Keynes, so they're not out of it. But I'm still sceptical they can really get beyond about 30, 32, 33%. Which, to me, that makes it a four-runner race. I think any one of the four with a good campaign, with the right dynamics in play, could get to 33, 35%. And I think that probably of the four, the one I'm really not that keen doing it is the Lib Dems.
I think one of the very interesting things about all the candidates as well is Mid Bedfordshire is the kind of place that likes a local. And you see that very, very clearly on local elections as well. If you don't live in the village or in the town, you're unlikely to get the support. Same thing for the by-election or a general election. And you've got a group of people who, with Lib Dem, lives in the southwest Bedfordshire constituency, not local. You've got Labour, who is a Waltham Forest councillor and has moved back into the area by renting a flat, and I guarantee you, if he loses, he's on the first train back to London. You've got the Conservative candidate who lives in Shefford, and we also need to remember that later on this year the boundary changes come into effect, and Shefford becomes Hitchin constituency. So the only one of the four major candidates who is truly local and will be local is going to be me.
Another angle to this we should really discuss is Nadine Dorries. Now, what effect does she have? I do think I've got a piece that I just wrote, but I'm going to put out tomorrow, but I'm discussing this. Dorries is not like 99% of politicians. She's a celebrity. I think her name recognition, I'm sure in the constituency, but nationally as well, is much bigger than most. She's clearly going to make the most of this by-election to promote her book, and it's timed with the Tory Party conference, and she'll be laying into Rishi Sunak at any opportunity. And what does that do to the Tory vote? I mean, surely I would have thought there are lots of constituencies who can't stand her and who are ultra motivated to vote, right? And it will just, her presence and her publicity will just remind them how to vote. And then also there are lots of Nadine Dorries supporters or Boris Johnson supporters who will probably take her message on board and say, well, there's no way I'm wasting a midterm vote on Rishi Sunak, who I don't support. And there's the point. I mean, it's not that hard to see in any other by-election with these demographics and dynamics that the Conservatives could have a bad night, drop from 60%, but get 40% and still win comfortably. I think here they probably will struggle to get beyond 30 because of the Dorries factor.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. But I think sort of Nadine Dorries and the way that she has sort of been in this constituency do have a wider impact on all parties. It doesn't show any political candidate very well who comes from a party political background, because I think people don't want to get burned twice. And I think that is making an awful lot of people think. But I think you're right. I think the Conservatives are going to struggle at this election. I think they are not going to be able to rely on the 24,000 vote majority. I just don't think that exists. Although Nadine Dorries was personally very unpopular here and has been for a long time, it's always been the Conservative vote that has carried her through. And because there's always been a lack of credible opposition from the other political parties. They've always stood people who may be absolutely lovely, but nobody wanted to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. He was not great, and they didn't want to vote for a Liberal Democrat party who had its vote collapse because it had jumped into the bed the Conservatives were in. So I think we're moving slightly beyond that now, but I still don't think that any Conservative vote is going to carry through into this. I just can't see it happening.
Can you see the Conservatives surviving because of split votes elsewhere?
Notionally, of course, it is possible. But I think this is going to be a very tightly fought election. So I don't think the margins are necessarily going to be huge here. And it probably is more of an election to lay the groundwork for the general election, because I think whoever comes out of this as the incumbent is going to be able to sort of perhaps try and reinforce what's going to happen in hypothetically about a year's time. When the country is going to go to the polls. But it does give an opportunity now for people to make their voices heard. And if they wanted to protest, I think now's the opportunity. And if they want to say a pox on all your houses to the political parties, now's the time to do it.
We've had a really comprehensive look at this, I think. Any sort of notes for the road, Paul? But just before that, actually, I might as well run through our latest odds with Star Sports, because they have been moving quite a bit recently. Just by the way, for those of you who aren't terribly inclined with fractional odds, the Lib Dems started out as 71% chances with Star Sports. They moved and they drifted out to 57% chances. So that's the sort of percentage we were talking about in terms of the implied chance to betting odds. That's for those of you who are not, who might be watching this and are not, massive punters, etc. Anyhow, the Lib Dems are currently 4-5. The Tories are 5-2. Labour are 100-30. Gareth here is 16-1. It's 100 bar. Those other parties' quotas are the Reform Party at 100s, the Greens at 200s, and the Monster Raving Loony Party at 500-1. Closing thoughts, Paul?
So, well, first of all, just to echo what you said at the start, I think this is the most exciting by-election we've had in ages. I can't actually remember one as good as this. I really can't. It's incredible, right? And it coincides with the Tory conference, so the media are going to be all over it, right? It's going to be really exciting. And if I'm honest, looking through it all, normally it doesn't take me that long to form a strong kind of conclusion. This one is up in the air. I could be completely wrong, right? I could well be completely wrong. But I am really at this point very confident that the Lib Dems are not going to win. I think they're a tremendous lay, and I think we're going to be looking back in a month and saying the betting was completely wrong one way or another. Either Lib Dems were totally overrated, or Gareth was totally underrated, or the Tories might. I mean, the Tories went right out at one point to 4-5-1. I do think they have a chance of getting through the middle. I wouldn't rule it out. But for betting wise, they would be my two positions I'd recommend to anyone. Lay the Lib Dems, even money-ish, and back Gareth at about 20-25 to 1, whatever he is. What did you say was?
16th with Star, which I do believe to be overs, particularly also as the opinion poll that Labour did commission had a very large percentage of don't knows, 37%, I think, which is sort of understandable given that this has been like a hypothetical election that is actually going to be a by-election for ages and ages, namely because the incumbent has just refused to leave for such a long period of time. But that amount of, I get the general feeling that that amount of voters being up for grabs is good for somebody who can connect locally. I think it probably gives an independent more of a puncher's chance. I think the ball is there to be hit. Something that's interesting. I would say if pushed from one of the big three, I might go Labour at the price is just, purely because they wouldn't get any sort of Dorries style backlash. And also I think the pipeline of disaffected Tory voters to don't knows is benefiting them more, I think, slightly nationally than it is the Lib Dems. But I do think this is going to be a very tight race, and I think it is going to go which way and t'other. Gareth, thank you so much for your time this evening. Give us some of your closing thoughts. We'll let you have the honour of rounding off the show.
Thank you. Well, looking at those odds, they've got to be encouraging. And if Granny's going to spend her tenner this week on making a bet, it's got to be worth a tenner of Granny's money at 16 to 1, surely. Let's do it now before the odds shorten. So, yeah, listen, it's going to be open. It's going to be up for the taking. And we're talking about historical proportions with an independent being in the running at this stage. Usually it's single issue. Usually they are some loon from a fringe. Yeah, I'm hoping people don't think I'm that loon, but hey, I can be anyone's loon. So hopefully they'll back me.
Thank you very much. I think it's a wonderful point at which to end this special edition of the polling station. Thank you very much for watching. We'll put some information in the show notes and see you when we next see you.
We are right in the heart of Mayfair, 36 Curzon Street, next to the famous Curzon Cinema. Across 2 floors, you can find 2 price finders, 5 digital form touchscreens, and a 38-screen customisable high-spec TV system. Myself and my team would love you to come and join us at Curzon Street and check out what we've got.